And we are live. In tonight's stream, I think what I'm going to end up doing is I have downloaded the ISO for Pardus 17.2. Let me pull up the distro watch announcement for Pardus. This was actually released sometime last week, Pardus 17.2. And I thought this would be an interesting distro to review on the channel because I've actually never looked at Pardus. I've heard of Pardus. Pardus has been around for many, many years. Originally, it was a Gentoo-based Linux distribution. Eventually, they moved beyond Gentoo, and they were really more of an independent distro for a while. And then, I guess, down the road, they moved to a Debian-based distro. But I've never used Pardus. I actually forgot Pardus was even around until the other day when I saw this distribution release here on distrowatch.com. So I thought I'd take a look at Pardus 17.2, and they offer two different versions for a desktop version. They offer XFCE, which is 1.3 gigs in size. They offer the Deepin desktop environment, which is also 1.3 gigs in size, slightly bigger than the XFCE ISO. Again, this is a distro I really don't know anything about, so I'm not sure what the install will entail. Not sure if we're going to run into any problems. Not even sure, it's always a possibility that I can't get the thing installed. There are certainly a lot of distros that I've tried to install before that have failed on me. Especially a lot of smaller distros people recommend to me, more garage distros, one-man operations. Hey, try this guy's, Joe Bob's Linux distro or whatever. And then I go to try to install it in a VM, and either the installer doesn't work, or you think the installer worked correctly, but when you reboot the VM, you get nothing except maybe a black screen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a virtual machine here for Pardus. So I'm going to name this Pardus 17.2 and DDE to let me know this is Pardus 17.2, the Deepin desktop environment. Then for type, instead of Microsoft Windows, of course, we want to choose Linux. For the version of Linux, instead of Ubuntu 64-bit, Pardus is based on Debian 64-bit. Although Ubuntu 64-bit probably would have worked just fine. There's not much difference between Debian and Ubuntu. Sometimes if you're not exactly sure what to pick, just picking Linux 4.x 64-bit here usually works for just about everything. I'm going to click Next. How much RAM do I want to give this VM? Since I've got OBS doing this stream, I've got 16 gigs of RAM. You know what? I'm going to give it plenty of RAM. I'm going to go ahead. Let's give it about 4 gigs. 4 gigs of RAM should be plenty for this virtual machine. Again, I don't know much about Pardus. I'm not sure how much disk space the install of Pardus needs. 15 gigs is usually what I create for these virtual machines. 15 gigs is good for just about every Linux distro I install. Occasionally I'll run across one where 15 gigs isn't enough. Usually those are the ones that are doing some kind of exotic partition schemes, like they're making, a swap partition, a home partition, a root partition, maybe some other partition, and trying to give all of them, several gigs each. So I've created my Pardus partition here. Now Pardus is not a rolling release distro. I've got it here in my rolling release group. I want to move this down here to my static release group. And then I need to go into the settings. for system, I have a 6-core processor. I'm going to give this VM 2 cores. That'll leave 4 cores, for my host machine, which should be plenty for what I'm doing right now. All I'm doing is running OBS and streaming, so I'll give the VM 2 cores. The other 4 cores, my host machine can still use. Video memory, we'll just up this a little bit. We always need to tick on Enable 3D Acceleration here in Virtualbox. Of course, we have monitor count as an option too. I do have multi-monitors, so instead of doing 1 monitor, I could do 3 monitors, and Pardus would open up on all 3 of my monitors. Just like if it was installed on physical hardware, I'd have a fully triple monitor setup. And I do run these VMs like that when I'm living in them, but I don't record them as such because I only record 1 monitor. So I'm only going to set it to use 1 monitor. For storage, of course, we need to add our ISO. And then the only other thing I do on these VMs, under user interface, I usually tick off all of this: file, machine, view, all the menu stuff. You don't need to see that in the these VMs, especially when I'm doing my distro reviews. It's just wasted space on the screen. So is this one here. It's the little sys-tray-like toolbar at the bottom of Virtualbox. You don't need to see that in these videos. So I usually tick both of those off. And now my VM is ready. Let me check into the chat here. Still early in the stream, so Richard is here though. Hello world. Hello Richard. Ron Lee. Hey y'all. Hey Ron. And Thomas Holt. Hello, good to see you all. Good to see you, Thomas. I'm glad you guys could make it here. Just another Sunday evening here. Of course, it's an interesting day because of the time change last night. I lost an hour of sleep. Well, we all did here in the U.S. Other than Arizona, which apparently is the only state that does not do daylight savings time, which is interesting. But losing that hour of sleep in the spring, I hate that. But you know what? On the flip side, I really love the fallback daylight savings time when we get that extra hour of sleep. So Tim F says, hey DistroTube. Hey Tim. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and start this installation of Pardus. Again, I don't know anything about Pardus. I've never installed it. I have no idea what the installation is going to entail. But like so many things I do on this channel, we're just going to go with it. Whatever happens, happens. Alan Rocco is in the chat. He says hello. Hello, Alan. Alright, so we need to go ahead, let Virtualbox capture my keyboard and mouse. Language, we have the option of Turkish or English. I'm going to choose English for this video. And then we have the option of booting into a live desktop environment or doing live safe mode. Install, which I'm assuming is a text-based installer because the next option, install with graphical user interface, so that's a GUI install. Then we have advanced options. You know what, I've seen this boot menu before, it's very familiar. This is Debian. Pardus, again, is Debian-based. So I bet there is probably an installer in the live environment. Let me just boot into the live environment and see. If not, we'll just reboot this VM, and then I'll do the standard Debian installer, either the text-based installer or the graphical one. I've installed Debian enough times. I think I can do that install in my sleep. Always takes a minute or two for these ISOs to load. And this is the same when you put them on USB sticks or you do a bootable DVD. Friendly reminder, the system has detected that you are using a virtual machine. Now this is one of the things that the Deepin desktop environment does. It basically is a warning saying, hey, we realize you're running a VM. this would work better if you did it on physical hardware. Yeah, I realize that. Alright, system has detected that you're using a virtual machine, which will affect the effect mode and common mode. Effect mode, you can smoothly and gorgeously experience. Common mode, you can experience, extremely rapidly experience. I'm going to choose common mode. I don't want all the Deepin desktop effects, not in a VM, especially not in a VM while I'm streaming. Probably just is not going to work out that well for me. Alright, this is our live environment, the Debian desktop, of course. Wonder if there is an installer. Again, I don't know much about Pardus, but it doesn't look like when I search for an installer that there is a GUI installer here, so I may have to go back to that boot menu. Which is not a big deal. We'll just run through your standard Debian text-based installer, or we can do the GUI installer. Either one would probably work out for us. Ron Lee, Pardus has been around forever. Yeah, Pardus. I've been living in Linux as my daily desktop driver for about 10 years. Of course, I've played around in Linux before that. Yeah, and Pardus has been around for a long time. That's what shocked me when I saw the distribution release on DistroWatch. I'd actually forgot all about Pardus. And I know many, many years ago when Pardus was around and kind of popular, it was Gentoo based. Now, of course, it's Debian based. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and reboot the VM. Go ahead and choose English. I'm going to go ahead and do the install with graphical user interface. This should be our standard Debian installer. Should be the Debian 9 installer. And M-Sayuti, hope I pronounced that right. Are there only 2 official desktop environments supported? Yeah, on the DistroWatch page, on the release announcement, all they had was an XFCE ISO or a Deepin ISO. So I'm not sure if Pardus does other desktops as official images, but all I know from the DistroWatch announcement was XFCE or Deepin. But I didn't look that hard. I haven't been to the Pardus website. Like I said, I really don't know anything about this. I'm just kind of winging it tonight. Sometimes I like to do these where, you know, go into something kind of blind, don't know what I'm getting into. Makes it a little interesting for me. Sometimes it makes it interesting for the viewers too, especially if I get into something that's a little tricky. Sometimes you guys have to watch me figure things out here. Yeah, Richard mentions, yeah, so this is basically Deepin on stretch. That's correct. This is basically your standard Debian install. This installer here is very familiar for anybody that's ever installed Debian. Only thing is you got some Pardus branding here. In the chat we have Steve Gerst. Hi, Steve. Iacobescu Adrian. Hello. Vacant 2012. A distro supported by the Turkish government. That is correct. Which some people have a problem with. A lot of people have a problem with the Deepin distro because it's made in China. Apparently some people have problems with certain countries of origin, but these are still open source projects. I mean, you can look at the code. So if you're worried about some kind of, you know, spyware or anything, it's all open source. It's all free and open source. So I personally don't worry about anything that's open source software because of, it's made in Turkey or China or anything like that. Hostname. Pardus has been selected for us. That's fine. Domain name, I just skip that. We really don't need to set one. Alright, our username. I always go with DT on my VMs. So username DT. A good password will contain a mixture of letters, numbers, punctuations, and should be changed at regular intervals. So let me pick a really hard password. Let me re-enter that really hard password. I'm going to click continue. Alright, my time zone is the central time zone here in the US. Interceptor. Hey DT, I'm currently on BSPWM. I have to say it's nice. Yeah, I need to take a look at BSPWM down the road. I've still got a few other minimal window managers to take a look at before I get around to looking at BSPWM, but at some point I'll get to it. Vacant. Agreed. Only problem I had with Deepin, for example, was that the mirrors were really slow. Okay. Yeah, that's a problem on a lot of the distros I review. Some distros just don't have very many mirrors. One of the problems I have with Red Core Linux, I really like Red Core. It's a Gentoo-based Linux distribution that uses the LXQt desktop environment. And it's a really great project. Really great developer, too. Anytime you have a problem, you contact the guy. He works on it right away. But that project, it only has 2 mirrors, one somewhere in Europe and one somewhere here in the US. And if you happen to not be that close to one of those mirrors, Red Core is not that great. Anthony Tucker says hi. Miguel is here. Yeah, Richard mentions, the original Deepin is from China. I guess that's the one with the mirror problems. Anyway, back to the install. Pardus, I'm going to let it do the automatic partitioning. Which in Debian, in Debian, it usually creates a swap for us. So I gave this virtual machine 4 gigs of RAM. It's going to create a 4 gig swap, which is kind of useless for a VM, but it's going to do it anyway. We have the option of also doing a home partition, or a home and a var and a temp partition. I'm not going to do any of those extra partitions because, again, in a VM, it would just be wasted space. So it created our swap, left us with about 12 gigs, an extended 4 file system. Extended 4 is usually what I go with on these. Let's see. Write changes to disk. You just click continue. And hope everything works out. Back to the chat. My 3 complaints with Deepin proper is the installer isn't real intuitive, plus no full disk encryption, and updates are hideously slow. Sven Lackman. Germany at night, 1 o'clock. Can't fall to sleep. Well, good thing you joined the stream. We should be able to put you to sleep pretty quickly here. Miguel, you should activate the donation on chat feature for streaming sessions. Yeah. Richard Addison, hey, this might be a distro worth checking. It says it's installing the system, copying data to disk. But the bar really isn't moving. I don't like that. Okay, it finally moved there. On some of these installs, I've had some of them where you get to a spot where it seems like it just hangs and hangs and hangs. I forget the distro it was, but I reviewed one on the channel that I swear the installer hung at a certain percentage, and it hung there for almost half an hour before it finally moved. But oddly enough, when it finally did move again, the installation completed and rebooted the VM and everything was working. So Bruno, greetings from Montreal. Welcome, Bruno. Good to have you. Yeah, Richard, Debian 9 plus Deepin sounds good. Yeah. I'm with you on the Debian 9 part anyway. I actually do like the Deepin desktop. I think it's one of the more attractive desktop environments, probably the most attractive desktop environment in Linux. I think it's very intuitive, very easy to use for people coming from Windows, for example. If it used less system resources, it would be perfect. But man, does it use a lot of CPU and RAM. And Richard, you're in Canada. Sven mentions he has autocorrect set for German, so please forgive his faults in writing. I don't think anybody's going to complain too much about grammar here in this chat. Pretty friendly group of people usually. I'm not a Debian guy, but I'm downloading Antics to give it a check. Yeah, Antics is awesome. If you like Debian and you like minimal window managers, Antics is really great. Antics is great because it's one of the few Debian-based distros that give you that option of, do you want to base Antics on Debian Stable, Debian Testing, or Debian Unstable? Most people, of course, go with Debian Stable. That's if you're running Debian, that's usually what you want to do. I mean, that's kind of why Debian is Debian, is because of that stable branch. But if you want to live in testing or unstable, it's there for you in Antics. Paulo Batista, hello, it's late here in Portugal. I will have to look at this post tomorrow. Well, have a good evening, Paulo. Kevin, you have many fans in Canada. Thank you, Kevin. The install looks like it's going well. Looks like it's configuring the apt package manager right now. The Debian install, by the way, for those of you that have never run a Debian install, this graphical installer or the text-based installer is very similar. It's just, you know, a little more typing, but not much. The Debian install is really easy. Many years ago, you know, the Debian install was a little more of a chore. I wouldn't say it was hard, but new users would probably have been put off by the Debian install, you know, 10-15 years ago. Nowadays, though, if you've successfully gotten through like a Fedora install or an Ubuntu install, you can probably get through the Debian install no problem. Alright, install the grub bootloader on the hard disk. It's already got yes chosen, and of course you want to install the bootloader. I really don't know why that is an option. And then /dev/SDA. And I say I don't know why that's an option. I'm sure there are people out there that for some reason don't want to install a bootloader. I just don't know why they would want to do that personally. That's not, but I'm not, you know, I'm not a sysadmin or anything like that. You know, I run these on a desktop, so, or a laptop. And yes, I want a bootloader. Atit, greetings from India. Good to have you. What time is it in India? And is it Sunday or is it Monday? Yeah, 6 a.m. Okay. So 6 a.m. Monday. Okay. So you are 11 hours ahead of where I'm at. It's 7:25 p.m. here. All right, installation has completed. All right. Make sure to remove the installation media so that you can reboot the new system. So continue, and then it's going to remove all the live packaging. Oh, Miguel mentions it's a nice option because you avoid crowding the EFI partition if you already have another distro installed. Yeah, I guess so. Say I never dual boot, so I didn't think about that. I've never been a dual booter. Usually, I'm running one operating system. When I'm done with it, I install another. Yeah, Tux 1313 also mentions about the bootloader. If you're running, if you have more than one distro installed, then it will find the new install and add it to the list to boot up. Okay. Richard, he always single boots, yeah. And the reason I say I only use one operating system at a time. Early on, I did dual boot. I dual booted Windows and Linux, and sometimes more than one Linux. But, the very first time, like that Windows update, just wipes out grub, especially when you're brand new. Yeah. You're like, well, why am I bother dual booting? Because it's always breaking something. So, and I wasn't paying attention to the VM rebooting here while I was looking at the chat. I didn't remove the ISO, but I guess it automatically removed the ISO on its own. So that is really neat. Let me type in my very complicated password here. All right, and we have Deepin. I don't know too much about the Deepin desktop environment, but I do know one thing. Every time I have looked at it, this Fullscreen Launcher, very reminiscent of the way GNOME Shell does its launcher, or Unity. You know what? I much prefer having this thing in a more traditional sort of window, such as this. This makes a lot of sense to me. This here seems like it's more geared toward a touch screen. Probably would look really good if you were on a tablet. On a desktop, I much prefer this menu, I think. All right. Let's see. Richard, looking good. Alan, all good so far. It's a GNOME Shell derivative. Deepin was it like a fork of GNOME at one point? And it seems like all these new desktops are, though. Pretty much when GNOME 3, when they made the switch from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3, that is really what started. Really all these desktops. I mean, Unity was born out of it. Cinnamon was born out of it. Mate was born not out of GNOME 3, but out of forking GNOME 2 and continuing GNOME 2. Budgie is another GNOME derivative. Pantheon, isn't it? I believe Pantheon's also another one. Pretty much all of them. all these new desktop environments in the last 7 or 8 years, they're all pretty much because of GNOME. Alright, looking through here, let's see. This here should give us our menu categories. So yeah, that really looks like a more traditional menu like you would find in like Plasma or XFCE. You know, we can view all the apps in this list here, or of course I can view them by category. Internet, we have Firefox, ESR, and then of course we have Evolution for our email client. I'm wondering why they went with Evolution. You installed Mozilla Firefox, why not Mozilla Thunderbird? But not a big deal. Most people today probably don't even use like desktop email. Most people are using webmail. I still use desktop mail though. I use you know, IMAP or POP3. You know. I own, you know, some of my own domain names and set up my own email. I've never been a Gmail user or Yahoo Mail user. But I would imagine for 99% of the people out there, they use webmail. So the music player is, of course, one of the Deepin apps. It's kind of one of the highlights of Deepin is their custom software. Have no music to play, obviously, in this VM. It's brand new installation. When we close it, it asks, do you want to minimize it to the system tray? Okay. And where does it minimize? Right here? Is that it? Oh yeah. Right clicking on that icon gives us the option of play pause. That toggles play and pause. Previous track, next track. And then exit, I'm assuming would just close the player out entirely. Vacant. Can you search for an app? I need that. You talking about in the menu system? Yeah, there was. If I just start typing, I'm assuming, for example, if I type term, you know, yeah, the Deepin terminal comes up, root terminal. Yeah. And I'm assuming it was the same way in the full screen kind of GNOME shell looking thing. If I start typing, yeah. So. And I'm kind of that way too, as far as if you're kind of a keyboard guy, a lot of times it's easier if you have the menu hotkey, which let's see, yeah, it's hotkeyed to super, so super T, and already you're kind of already there. A lot of times that's so much easier than trying to navigate a menu system. Miguel, yeah, there is a search icon in the top of the menu. Yeah, right here, yeah. So I guess you could physically click on it, left click with the mouse, and your cursor is there. But you really don't even have to click on anything. As soon as you start typing on the keyboard, your search query is going to start appearing there. All right, Sven Lackman, is this an active desktop? Not sure what you mean as far as an active desktop. Richard, control center on the right side. Alright, video, of course, Deepin movie. I have no movies to play, so let's see if they actually gave us any kind of anything to play. Now the video folder is empty, so no kind of test video that we could run. Also under video we have the Deepin screen recorder, Deepin voice recorder, MPV. I wonder why they have MPV and the Deepin movie player both installed. It's possible that MPV is a dependency of Deepin movie. Maybe it's based on it. I don't know. Graphics. Deepin screenshot. The Deepin image viewer. A lot of Deepin apps. Miguel, by active, he means if you can create and place folders in the desktop. And the desktop is like on the actual desktop. So like if I right click and new folder, yeah, that works. And I'm assuming if that's what you mean, you were asking because it's a GNOME derivative, GNOME has taken that function out. But GNOME took that function out of like more recent GNOME 3 desktops. I'm not exactly sure how long Deepin's been around. It's been around a number of years. Probably when they forked GNOME and started working on Deepin, though. Nautilus, which is the file manager in GNOME, still had icons on the desktop enabled. Yeah, you don't like icons on the desktop? Neither do I. I'm just going to delete that new folder. The Deepin Color Picker. This is an interesting tool. I can't run it without turning on window effects. Okay. So I won't be able to do that. But the first time I ever looked at the Deepin Color Picker, I launched it just like I did there, and nothing happened. And I thought, well, did the program crash or did it not install correctly? What it does is you pick something on your desktop with the mouse, and it returns the color of that. So great for you guys that are doing any kind of like custom theming or building an icon set, or you guys that like to play with your X resources file, your terminal color schemes. Really neat tool. Okay. Image Magic is installed. Libreoffice Draw is installed. Under Office, we have the rest of the Libreoffice suite all installed. We have a text editor. Is this gedit? It is gedit 3.22. Gedit is a pretty nice text editor. The only thing I hate about gedit is sometimes it wants to create like a million backup files. It's like you go to save something in gedit and it saves that file, but then it also saves a separate backup file of it. And if you do a lot of work in a text editor, you end up with backup files like all over your home folder. I'm sure there's a way probably to turn that feature off in gedit, to tell it to quit saving all those backups. Miguel, is it running Xorg or Wayland? Oh, that's interesting. I am not sure on that, Miguel. Since it's Debian 9 based, I would assume, wasn't Debian 9 using Wayland when they no, Debian 9 is not using Wayland by default, but you can use it. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with Xorg and Wayland. Usually they're both installed on distros now, although which one is being used by default? Like right now in Ubuntu 17.10, Wayland is the default display server. But for some reason in 1804, for stability reasons I'm assuming, Xorg is going to be the default display server. So Xorg was the default display server before, then they switched to Wayland, then they're going back to Xorg. This whole display server thing is a mess. Wayland has been under development now for like 10 years. It's been under development for a long time, and it's nowhere close to being ready. And yet people still think like Xorg is gonna go away one day, like in the near future, like 3-4 years down the road. We won't be running X11 anymore. We'll all be on Wayland. No, Xorg is still gonna be with us 20 years down the road. And that's not an exaggeration. Xorg will still be installed on most machines, even if you're running Wayland. Isn't X11R6 still under development? I'm not sure on that. You know, I was thinking the other day, this whole X11 versus Wayland discussion. Is X12 still under development? I mean, they have been working on a version of X called X12 for a long time, too. Guess I could try to search for that in Wikipedia here in a minute. Back to Pardus for a second. Reading. Document viewer. I don't think I've ever seen a category called reading in a Linux distro before, but it's there. Then we have our system tools, the Deepin file manager. An attractive file manager. I'm assuming it was at one point forked from Nautilus. We have the Deepin terminal. While I have the terminal up, I know many of you are probably wondering. I'm kind of wondering myself. 4.9 is the kernel. Makes sense. Again, we're basing this thing on Debian stable. I'm assuming this is the stable branch of Debian. Again, no research into Pardus whatsoever before I hit the record button, before I hit the start stream button here this evening. Let's see. Let's actually read DistroWatch's description of Pardus. It is a GNU/Linux. There, people, I said it. GNU/Linux distribution jointly developed by the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey and the National Academic Network and Information Center, whatever those organizations are. It started life as a Gentoo-based project before developing its own unique identity. Since late 2012, it's been developed in 2 separate branches as corporate and community editions and is based on Debian. That still didn't tell me which branch of Debian, but I'm pretty sure this was Debian stable. Especially since it used the standard Debian 9 installer. That particular installer is Debian stable. If you want to install Debian testing or Debian unstable, you usually have to tick the advanced options in the boot menu when you first launch the ISO. And then under advanced options, there's an installer, like a net installer. You do that one, and somewhere along the way in that particular installer, you have the option of choosing which branch you want to use. Stable, testing, unstable. Augusto, it's not a GNOME 3 derivative. It's written in Qt. Okay. Vacant is leaving us. He has to go prep his meals. Okay. See you, Vacant. Glad you could stop by. Richard, he likes the Qt toolkit. Everybody likes the Qt toolkit. Seems like everybody wants to get away from GTK. Other than GNOME, of course. Alright, under the system tools, we have computer. What is this? This is just our computer directory in the file manager. I wonder why that's there. Show desktop, of course, would just hide anything on the desktop. The trash, I'm assuming, opens the trash directory. And of course, here is our control center. Updates. I didn't even think about this. Being that this was released, I don't know, less than 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't think there would be that many updates. And if it is Debian stable, there certainly shouldn't be that many updates. So Richard likes the Qt toolkit. Still, it has some GNOME in it. You're talking about the Deepin. It has some elements of GNOME in it. Yeah, if it's a Qt desktop environment, which I'm sure Augusto's probably right on that. It's strange that they're using gedit for a text editor, because there's some really nice Qt text editors they could be using. I mean, they could install something like Kate, which is KDE's text editor. I don't know what kind of dependencies that would bring in though, but even lightweight Qt text editors, there's a million of them. Let's see. Tux. Yeah, the sources file should tell you which Debian it is based on. Yeah, we can take a look at that. What is the sources list in Debian? Is that /etc/app sources.list? Yeah. Well, here are our official Pardus repos. We do a main, and then non-free, and then contrib. Assuming, since we have one called non-free, they're not afraid to, ship non-free software, which is nice. Richard, this distro looks pretty cool and usable to me. Well, the Deepin desktop environment is very usable. The one thing, I haven't even looked through all the programs yet. Kind of taking my time here, but let's pull up the system monitor. Here's what really keeps me from using it. Watch the CPU percentage. Let me just move something around. Let me open up even something lightweight, the file manager. Minimize it, moving my cursor around a little bit. I mean, that's a lot of CPU for really nothing running. And then the memory, I gave it 4 gigs of memory. It's taking up 800 megs right now. And we're doing nothing. Well, we do have the music player still in the system tray, so I could close that. Let me exit that. Let me go ahead and kill the file manager. And still 730 megs. 730 megs, and really the only thing running is the system monitor here. Yeah, Sven said, wow, heavy. Yeah, and that is without doing anything in it. When you really start opening up some of the Deepin programs, and you have several open, that CPU really spikes. And this is the mode that doesn't have all the effects. This is the common mode or whatever. If you turn on the actual effects, CPU usage skyrockets. I'm talking like 100% here in this VM. Wouldn't be a shock. I mean, it really pushes the CPU. I'm sure it's better on physical hardware. Doing a lot of graphical effects and stuff in a VM, that's not really something, that's not a fair test. But still, when you turn that thing on and the CPU, spikes to 100%, even if it's not, a fair test, I'm not just itching to put that thing on my real machine. So, speaking of mode, fashion mode, efficient mode, here on the panel, Oh, I like that a lot better. That looks like a more traditional kind of panel. You have a more traditional kind of menu system. This, you know, it's very reminiscent of Windows. I think this, like new to Linux users, would be very comfortable with this rather than the other mode, which was more of a dock-like look, and the other menu, which, you know, had that Unity Dash or GNOME shell type launcher going on. This is kind of you know, has a Windows 7 kind of quality to it. Multitasking view. We can't run that without turning on window effects. I wonder if I should just turn on window effects and see how this works. Where would I turn on the Windows effects? I know there has to be an option somewhere. I know if I reboot the machine, there's probably an option. Maybe display. Enable window effects. Okay, well that's some really nice transparency that it was enabled. Looks very pretty. Looks really pretty. Let's open up the system monitor again. And wow, look at that CPU percentage. And this is with nothing open. And this is without me moving around anything. Wow. Memory. We got a little bit of an uptick in memory usage, 850 megabytes. That's not just horrible. I mean, GNOME would look something like that too. So, but the CPU usage is just off the charts. For 4 cores too, it's taking up a third. 33%, 34%. That's unreal right there. Rose is in the chat. Hello, Rose. Alan, oh man, that CPU, yeah. And Ron Lee, oh my word, pig, yeah. Mike, Deepin is a beautiful distro, but the last time I used it, the App Store had out-of-date apps, yeah. This is not the Deepin distro, this is Pardus we're looking at tonight. It uses the Deepin desktop environment, but let's open up the software center here. Is that not the software center? Deepin package manager. It says drag and drop a file here. I thought. So how do I get to the store, like the GUI store that has all the packages in it? I know they have one. I've looked at it. At least in the Deepin distro, I've looked at it. But here, the only, I mean, it should be under System, but the only thing having to do with software is this right here, Deepin Package Manager, that I can find. And it says drag and drop a file here, so I'm assuming it's for installing from a deb file. So something like a gdebi, you know, for those of you that are used to the gdebi program in Debian or Ubuntu. Rose, what does DistroTube like as a Linux distro? I'm not much of a distro snob. I can run anything, really. I like Debian because I tend to use stable distros on my machines. But I don't mind playing around in rolling release distros either. I know Arch Linux pretty well. I've done a lot of Arch installs over the years and a lot of Arch-based distros. Even before doing this channel, and since doing this channel, I do receive some criticism sometimes that I install a few too many Arch-based distros. So I do like Arch, Gentoo-based distros. I don't mind them too much, although I'm not sure, if I would ever really want to live on one, like on a production machine, anything I want to be stable. Never lived in any of the RPM distros. I have never actually put Fedora or SUSE, on physical hardware and lived in it. Looked at them, reviewed them, but I've never actually put one on a machine and actually kept it and did work in it. So I'm not an RPM distro guy. I mean, I review those distros on the channel, but it's not something I'm comfortable with. And I probably should give, distros like Fedora and SUSE a little more love on the channel. I know there's, especially, Fedora seems to have a lot of users out there. And when you look at YouTube, there's not a lot of people that are really doing Fedora videos. Well, there's a million people doing stuff on Debian and Ubuntu and Arch. Even Gentoo. I mean, there's guys that do some pretty good stuff on Gentoo. And Richard, yeah, it's the equivalent of GDebi. Yeah, that's what it looks like, because it has this box and it has this file going into the box with the Debian logo in it. So yeah, I'm assuming that's just GDebi. So we got Rose. Yeah, some of y'all were answering Rose's question about my distro. I'm running Manjaro right now. Yeah. And when I started this channel, my main production machine was running the Ubuntu LTS, and I used that to make videos on the channel for about 2 months. Then I switched to Manjaro. I've been running that about 3 months on my main production machine, and I probably in the next, 2 or 3 weeks, gonna wipe out Manjaro, move on to something else, try something else, on physical hardware, see how things go. I'm not sure what I want to do on that. Alan, try Linux from scratch. Yeah, I get people. You're joking. I get people asking about Linux from scratch, though. The problem with Linux from scratch is it just takes so long to install. I mean, it takes weeks, especially if you don't have, a lot of time. I don't have any days where I have all day just to sit at a computer and do these things. That's why I don't do, a mainline Gentoo install. And Gentoo is nothing like Linux from scratch. Linux from scratch seriously takes weeks to do. And it's just not worth it. It would be very hard to record all that, edit all that. You'd have to put it probably in a series of videos. And then, to be honest, nobody would be interested in watching Linux from scratch. There's just not really anybody that's that interested in Linux from scratch. I mean, I'm kind of a Linux nerd, and I don't watch Linux from scratch videos, Lamer Linux, something like Manjaro, try Antergos. Yeah. Yeah, if I'm going to switch from Manjaro, though, I'm probably going to do something quite a bit different. Antergos and Manjaro are kind of the same, just two sides of the same coin. They're both pretty much Arch. Richard is an apt man. Yeah, I like the apt package manager. Fedora is great if you can live without PPAs, so to speak. Well, the great thing about the times we live in now with snaps and Flatpak and app images, installing software is a lot easier now, especially with snaps, because of the work Canonical is doing in Ubuntu. I mean, they're really working hard to get to the point where they can pretty much do all of their packaging in snaps, So, any software you want to install these days, it seems like you can probably find a snap for much of it. Flatpak, there's still not that many Flatpak packages out there. When you go to, what is it, Flat Hub, is that the name of the site? There's just not that many Flatpaks still. And app images is even worse. There's hardly any app images. I don't know much about the underlying technology, the difference between Snap, Flatpak, and app images, but snaps are pretty squared away. If you're running Ubuntu, it's already baked in. Snapd is already installed. You just sudo snap install whatever. But even if you're not on Ubuntu, like I'm using Manjaro, I've installed Snapd on it. It's, you install snap and then the same thing, sudo snap install whatever. And using something like Snaps or Flatpak on something like Arch is really nice, because then there's no need to do anything with the AUR. You can just leave that alone. You don't have to worry about building packages from source from the AUR. Lamer, Manjaro isn't really Arch. They don't use the Arch repos. They have their own repos. Yeah, that's true. They hold things back. They have their own repos. Antergos is more closely aligned with Arch. And Alan mentions Arco Linux is the best Arch-based distro. Yeah. Really, really like what Eric Dubois has done with Arch Merge, now Arco Linux. Rose mentions Tux Digital seems to prefer snaps as the future to update packages. Yeah, it makes sense. Because, especially with the push that Canonical's doing with snaps, they're not that far away from being able to ship Ubuntu and, like, the Software Center be nothing but snaps. That is in the not too distant future. That's probably where they're going with that. And then once they're able to do that, pretty much any distro that you're running, snaps work on every distro. So once Ubuntu is able to do that, pretty much that's going to change the game for everybody as far as installing software. Undefined Particle mentions he's been thinking about moving to Void for a while. I'm on, you guessed it, right now. For me, the best Arch Linux distro is Arco and Antergos. For the best Ubuntu-based distro, Linux Lite. Yeah, I like Linux Lite. Linux Lite, Peppermint, LXLE, Lubuntu. There's a lot of really good Ubuntu-based and Debian-based distros that use XFCE and LXDE, or some kind of hybrid of the two. And who goes here? I just switched back to Ubuntu from Manjaro. I guess everyone is distro hopping. I kept the i3 window manager going though. Yeah. The thing with these minimal window managers like i3 or OpenBox or Awesome or Xmonad or any of that, when you get it configured the way you want it and you save your configs, put them on GitHub, it doesn't matter what Linux distro you're running underneath, Ubuntu, Arch, Gentoo, Fedora. You just pull down your i3 configs and you have the exact same i3 you had on whatever distro you came from. No, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the distros until you actually open a terminal and get into the package management stuff. And that would be the only time you would be able to tell that you're running Ubuntu instead of Manjaro. And Alan, what about Peppermint? As far as me installing it on my main machine, I could do Peppermint. I'd have no problems living in it. Anyway, back to what were we actually doing a video on Deepin. Well, they come with their own Pardus image writer tool. Now this could be an interesting feature. I really like the SUSE image writer tool for writing bootable USB sticks. Yeah, choose the disk image. So, of course, I can't make one here. But it is interesting that they have their own image writer tool. And that is a Pardus tool. That is not something, that's not a Deepin app. And we, of course, have a root terminal. That's pretty much the packages that are installed on here. I wouldn't call it a bloated distro, certainly not in terms of software installed. Not bloated at all in that respect. The only bloat really is the Deepin desktop environment itself. So I think that is enough of a very brief look at the install process of Pardus. And then Deepin, it's pretty much the standard Deepin desktop environment. And I think what I will do with some remaining time here, let's look at some viewer comments here. Alright. So some recent videos I've made since the last live stream. This one here kind of set some people off. The Linux community is toxic. Let's patch this. I'm actually surprised at this one here, because when I made this video, and I thought it needed to be made, I got, well, you can already see there's 278 comments on this video, and so many of them share their negative experiences within the community. Hey, I was a new Linux user and I went to whatever forum and they were mean to me and I went back to Windows. I mean, there's a lot of comments like that. Or I used to do a YouTube channel on Linux and the trolls got to me and I quit. There's 2 or 3 people that used to do like YouTube Linux tutorials that commented on this video saying they quit because of the community. There's people, you know, that have worked on open source projects commenting here that, you know, they were treated poorly so they quit, and, you know, instead of working on open source software or working at Microsoft or wherever now. Yeah, I mean, I was really shocked. I mean, I thought this video needed to be made about the toxic community, but I couldn't believe how quickly I got hundreds of comments, and a lot of it, again, is people sharing basically their negative experience within the Linux community. Matter of fact, the one I pinned right here was one of the very first comments. Yeah, it's cruel. It's really cruel, the Linux community. I haven't used Linux for weeks because of the things I've seen and read. Anyway, I still enjoy your videos. So that's your standard kind of comment really throughout this thing. And then, of course, there's a lot of people that got the RTFM comment on certain forums out there. RTFM for read the effing manual. Oh, we've been mentioning Arco Linux. I'm sure many of you saw my recent video on Arco Linux where I went through the Awesome Window Manager install in Arco. That was a really, really fantastic version of Awesome Window Manager. Eric Dubois' custom configs of Awesome Window Manager. Really liked that. I would have no problem installing Arco Linux and installing his version of the Awesome Window Manager on my main production machine here. I would have no problem living in that thing. Of course, I'm kind of comfortable with tiling window managers. And, of course, earlier today, about an hour ago, I posted a video that I'm about to distro hop, of course, on my main production machine, which many of you have already commented on, giving me some suggestions to for possible replacements for Manjaro here. And some of you have asked on the comments in that video, have I had any problems with Manjaro? No, Manjaro's been great. The distro's been great. The community's been great. It's just time to hop to something else. I didn't like KDE, and you guys know I installed the KDE edition of Manjaro. I don't like the KDE desktop environment, which I've already got rid of KDE off this Manjaro installation. I'm running OpenBox now. But I've had no issues with Manjaro. I've had no breakages, even like minor breakages. I mean, the only thing I've had a couple of instances where Pulse Audio was updated as part of, whatever updates were going on that day, and the configs for Pulse Audio were kind of screwed up. Mic levels and stuff like that were not what they were, what I had them set to before. But that's kind of a minor thing. I haven't had any like major breakages where like a piece of software I use, no longer works. And I certainly haven't had any major breakages like, you boot up the machine and it no longer boots up. So Manjaro's been great. It's just time to try something else. Back to some of the comments I've missed here. Randy, I never asked for help about Linux, but thanks to YouTube and Google, it's my friend. Yeah, I'm the same way. Early on, I would sign up at various Linux forums to get help because I thought that's really the only place to get help. But yeah, these days I just Google the answer because it's already posted somewhere. Beyond Google, the Arch Wiki and the Gentoo wikis. Everyone should have those two wikis bookmarked. Those are your best sources of information, is the Arch Wiki and the Gentoo wiki. Even if you're not running Arch or Gentoo, have both of those wikis bookmarked. Mike, haha, commercials. Use Brave when using YouTube. Yeah. I normally don't run any kind of ad blocker or anything like that. I do have an ad blocker installed in Firefox, but I only enable it when I'm making a video and if I'm showing a website that like has a ton of ads, it looks kind of tacky. So, but other than that, like my normal daily life, I just look at ads. They don't bother me too much. And yeah, we should be using Brave. Richard says Brave is okay. I've never tried Brave. I need to take a look at that one. Brave takes away the commercials on YouTube. It reminds me of YouTube before Google took over. Let me kill this virtual machine. Oh, I killed the chat. Don't you hate it when you do a kill command for the wrong thing? Let me see if I can pull the chat back up. On my OpenBox setup, I have the middle scroll wheel on the mouse. Middle click kills a window. If I'm at the keyboard, I have Super Shift C, also hotkeyed to kill a window. For example, instead, I can middle click down here in the panel, and that window will go away. Or if it's got focus, Super Shift C kills it too. Some of the neat little functionality in OpenBox. And I have got a million comments here in the last couple hours about distros. Antergos gets a lot of love here. Solus. A lot of people want me to put Solus on my main machine. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to put Solus on my laptop. I'm going to install something on my laptop and something on my desktop, something new. And I know for sure I'm going to do Solus Budgie on my laptop. I've already decided that. So I'm not going to do Solus on my desktop too. I'm going to pick something different. A lot of people have suggested MX and Antics. Being a Debian guy, those would both be great. Crux, I don't know anything about, so I probably wouldn't do Crux. FreeBSD, I'm not a BSD guy, really, so absolutely not. Especially FreeBSD, they don't allow me to send virtual hugs, so probably not going to do that one. Toss wants me to run Ubuntu Mate, Total OS today. Yeah, he loves Ubuntu Mate. I do too. I would consider Ubuntu Mate. It's not bad. I've had a few people suggest Deepin. PCE Nuggets here wanted Crux, Void, Gentoo, or LFS Linux from scratch. I'm definitely not going to do Linux from scratch. I'm definitely not going to do Gentoo either. A proper Gentoo install takes a few days, and that's if you're really sitting at a computer and have time to do it. Again, I just don't have that kind of time. Another vote for MX17 from Red Robbo. Ron Lee. Yeah, Ron, you wanted me to do MX too. A lot of people want MX. Sparky Linux. Sparky Linux was really nice. I liked it when I reviewed it. Arco Linux. Antics, MX17. So a lot of the same suggestions keep coming up. I could try Fedora 27. Yeah, I mean, I said I never lived in an RPM distro. Maybe I should try it. Problem is, I don't want to really live in GNOME either. I mean, that's kind of their flagship edition is Fedora with GNOME. Back to the chat. What did I miss? Q4OS, yeah. Crux, yeah. Fedora, Antics, more Fedora. Alan Rocco, GNU Sense. No, I'm not going to run any of the free distros. None of those that are sponsored by the free software people and Richard Stallman. So no Triskel, no GNU Sense. For one thing, I'm not going to run the free drivers for my video card. You know, I've got to run the proprietary drivers. I mean, I'm not even sure how this stream would go, like doing something like a YouTube stream would go running the open source drivers. It might work out, I don't know, but I know the proprietary drivers work, so. Hector, if you like Kdenlive, remember all the dependencies. Yeah, I install Kdenlive regardless of the desktop because it's such a great program. It's one of those programs I don't care about all the dependencies. You know, I kind of have to have Kdenlive. Highland mentions he's having some issues with the desktop, which is making me think of Deepin Linux. Now, what desktop were you running, Highland? I guess I missed it in the chat. Oh, he used K4OS today. It's awesome. Okay. And Ubuntu Budgie. Yeah, I really liked Ubuntu Budgie when I reviewed it on the channel. I like the Budgie desktop. I like the Budgie desktop in Solus. I like the Budgie desktop in Ubuntu. And they kind of have different setups, the way they do Budgie between the two. And I like both of them. Solus, a little bit more traditional, the way I kind of like it. Bottom panel, menu, icons only, taskbar. I think in Ubuntu Budgie they do a top panel. The menu and panel at the top. I think they also do a dock, like a side dock. But I really like that setup too. So. And Tux, what desktop environment do you like? I'm not sure who you're asking that to, but I don't normally run full desktop environments. I know I don't like GNOME. I've never liked the GNOME desktop, just the workflow of it. And the fact that it's so heavy on system resources. It's kind of like the worst of the bunch. KDE, I can handle KDE, the look and feel of it. It's just KDE, when I was running it, just didn't seem to be that stable. It had weird graphical glitches. I had programs crashing. XFCE is not bad. I could live in XFCE. Mate. I like Mate. LXDE is probably the best one for somebody like me. Very lightweight, very stable. Trinity wasn't bad when I looked at it in K4OS or Q4OS. NixOS, I haven't looked at that one, Alan. I do need to review that distro sometime on the channel. I've had people request it. And Jeff C, Calculate, yeah. I may do Calculate on my main production machine. I'm considering it. Not sure how well that would work out. May be a complete and total disaster. It may work out great. Only way to find out is just go ahead, format the drive and install. Yeah, Budgie is moving to Qt. Yep, they're moving from GTK over to the Qt toolkit. They're still Solus is going to have a new version out pretty soon. They're not going to be moving to Qt just yet in this next release, but maybe the following one, the release after this next one, they'll probably be on Qt by then. Yeah, window managers only. Yeah, that's usually what I do. I just like things snappy, speedy. Once you get used to just things loading up fast, well, I've got stuff opening up on other monitors. I've got a triple monitor set up. Let's see. And everything is got focus on a different monitor. There we go. Of course, that's not lightning fast because I have a compositor set to slow some of these animations down here in OpenBox. If I turn the compositor off, all of this is like instant. And it's so instant that it can be kind of jarring, like it's too fast almost. You want to slow it down. So you turn on some of the compositing effects in a compositor like Compton, so the windows don't open like instantly. They kind of fade in a little bit. I mean, like a microsecond. The same thing when you close them. Same thing with the menu systems when you navigating through menus. But once you get used to like the speed of something like OpenBox or Fluxbox or tiling window managers like i3 or Awesome or any of that, it's really, really hard to go back to something like Plasma or GNOME. It is like all of a sudden you have walked into a quicksand, If you've only spent a few days or a few weeks in something minimal like OpenBox, it might not be such a big change, but if you're like me, I mean, I've been using OpenBox for many, many years, and it's really tough, especially something like KDE or GNOME, those two especially. They just, I'm not having fun when I'm running those desktops. That's the only way I can put it. I don't enjoy it. Highland mentions he's got 30 minutes remaining for Deepin. Netrunner threw out a new version today. Yeah, I saw that. I reviewed Netrunner on the channel recently, actually. Maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I did the rolling release version of Netrunner, the one that's based on Manjaro. It was pretty good. I haven't looked at their static release version that is based on, is it Debian they base on, I think, for the static release version? I'm sure it's solid too. I mean, it's Debian, so should be good. DistroTube, what distro have you run the longest? Yeah, let me think about that. I've had some machines that only knew one distro the whole time I've had them. I know I had a machine one time that it must have been 5 years or so. 4 or 5 years, and the only thing that was ever on it was Debian stable. This machine I'm on right now, I know that I ran Ubuntu, the latest LTS on it, since 16.04 first came out, and I think I might have been running an earlier version of Ubuntu than that when I first installed Ubuntu on this. So maybe 2 years or so for Ubuntu LTS on this this desktop I currently have sitting in front of me before I went to Manjaro. The longest operating system I've ever had on any machine that I used on a daily basis, I had a machine with Windows XP on it many, many years ago. I want to say 7, 8 years. Usually, if I have an operating system on a machine, whatever it is, especially like Linux distros now, I usually buy stuff with Linux pre-installed. Whatever distro came on it, unless I'm having a problem with it, I'm not much of a distro hopper. A lot of the distro hopping I do these days, I'm doing because of the channel. But it's not like something I need to do. Usually, once I get everything set and everything's working right, I'm not looking to, mess things up. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're asking, and this is probably what Randy's getting at, is rolling release distros. What's the longest I've had a rolling release distro up and running and without any kind of major breakages? I've never really run a rolling release distro longer than a few months. Now, there are people out there that claim that they've had Arch installs up and running, the same Arch install, without having to reformat and install another newer version of Arch for 4, 5, 6 years. I don't know how true that is, but I can believe it. Things no doubt broke on those people. So they had major breakages along the way, but they were just able to fix them. Me, I'm not much of a fixer on the really major stuff. If it's going to take me longer than 15 minutes these days, but even back in the day when I started, I had a little more time on my hands. If I was working on something, say an hour or longer, and I couldn't fix it, it was time to go ahead and format the drive, reinstall. These days, if I'm going to spend 10 minutes on something, sometimes I reinstall, especially now that some of these distros, the install process is so quick, just for sake of time. It's not worth spending, hours trying to find a solution to a problem if the problem can be solved by a quick nuke and pave. So, is Netrunner Arch still around? No, they're doing a Manjaro for their rolling release version. So I'm not sure if they'd have just a standard Arch version. I'd have to look into that, though. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. Ron Lee says they released a new version like a month ago. Is that the Netrunner Arch? Netrunner Arch is, but they are concentrating on Netrunner Debian. Okay. The only full-featured desktop environment I could go back to after i3 is XFCE. Yeah. XFCE is really nice because it's stable and nothing ever changes in it. It's not updated, Not like GNOME and Plasma, constantly being updated to the next thing, You go many years in between seeing major updates with XFCE. Highland, Ron Lee was speaking to Highland. He's heard that people like Manjaro Deepin. I haven't tried Manjaro's Deepin edition, so I can't speak onto that. But I'm sure it's great. All the Manjaro editions I have tried have been great. I've tried, of course, the KDE edition. I've looked at their i3 edition, and the flagship product, the XFCE edition. I need to do a video on that one, actually. I don't think I've ever done that one on the channel. It's great, though. Antergos has put a new build for Deepin on the Cinchi installer. Okay. Yeah. And I've seen that in the installer, actually, playing around in Antergos recently. Deepin is one of the desktop environments that is in the installer. You have Deepin and Mate, GNOME. I think even OpenBox is an option in the Antergos installer. Hector mentions it's possible in NeoFetch to show the day you installed the distro. Okay, yeah. They have some system information in NeoFetch. Shows the name of your terminal, name of font, host name, domain name, uptime, kernel version. You can put anything you want to practically in Neofetch. Highland, did I miss the Debian install? Can I see a sneak peek of it before I try Debian 15.5? Well, that was a Pardus install. It just happened to be using the Debian desktop environment, but that is Pardus. It was the distro we were doing there. As far as the difference between Pardus and Debian, probably not much. Both of them are based on Debian. Both of them do the Debian desktop, and both of them don't come with much software pre-installed. It's mainly just the Debian apps. So, look pretty similar. The only thing that I could tell that was a little different was I couldn't find like the Debian Software Center. I guess that is a Debian only thing, for the Debian distro itself. It is interesting that now I have the panel at the top. I did not put this panel at the top before. That is a glitch. You see the menu is actually opening at the bottom, like the panel is here. You know what? It's because we turned on the effects earlier. Let me go ahead and turn the effects off. We were testing to see if those effects made a difference in performance. They kind of did, in a really negative way. So where was enable window effect? Let's definitely turn that off. Yeah, now everything looks right. Highland, is there anything you wanted to see here in Pardus, their Debian edition? The only problem in Debian is the Bumblebee driver in some NVIDIA. You cannot boot without specific boot arguments. And Alan Rocco at Thomas Holt, sad but true. What did Thomas Holt say? That video about toxic Linux is so right. Yeah. I don't get trolls on the channel much. Occasionally I get somebody, that's wanting to start something or say something, kind of crazy. But usually nothing out of hand. I just ignore the trolls. But you don't see too many on my channel. Very rare. But that particular video, I actually had to delete some comments from that video. There's almost like 300 comments on that video now. And there were a couple of people that took real issue with that video. One particular one I had to delete was cursing excessively toward me. I guess he didn't find my comment that the Linux community is toxic. I guess he took offense to that. So what did he want to do? He wanted to spout a bunch of toxic stuff at me. Because, the Linux community apparently is not toxic in his opinion. And then I had one guy in that particular video. I think I used the term free software Nazis, referring to the people, that want you to only run free software, that if you run proprietary software, you're a bad person. And I called those people free software Nazis in the video. Well, I had a real Nazi make a comment on the video. Basically, he took offense to me using the term Nazi in that video because that's not what Nazis really are. And then he posted a bunch of like Nazi propaganda links in the comments telling me what, a Nazi really is. So I had to delete all of his stuff. I mean, it's just crazy how that video, like I really don't get trolls, but man, that video set some people off. And that's the only video I've ever made. How many videos have I made now? Let me check this. 142, of course with tonight's stream it'll be 143 videos I've made. That is the only video I've ever had to delete comments from. and I've had to delete several from that video. So when people say, the Linux community is not toxic, some people try to defend that position. I don't know. There is one section of that video I left. I didn't delete it. There are two guys that are cursing at each other in the comments of the video, and I left that because they basically are cursing at each other, so they seem to be enjoying it, but they're serious. I mean, they're really spouting a bunch of nasty, hateful stuff at each other because they had some disagreement in the comments. And basically, I leave that in there because it proves my point about the Linux community being toxic. Altis, what is Pardus? It is a Debian-based distro. It is a very old distro that started life as a Gentoo-based distro. Now it's based on Debian. This is their Deepin edition. As far as what's special about it, is it, what's the difference between running this and just your standard Deepin distro? Probably not much. Highland mentions, what does the dock look like? Not sure. What are you asking there? If you're asking about the panel here in Deepin, you have two options for mode. I have it ticked onto efficient mode, which is a full screen, traditional style panel. If you go to fashion mode, it makes it look more like a dock. It's no longer taking up 100% of the space. It's centered at the bottom of the screen, and the icons are a little bigger. It looks more like a dock. Of course, location, you can put it at the bottom, you can put it at the top. For you people that like the left side, and I don't mind having a dock or a panel on the left side, that works too. And you can even do it on the right side. The right side doesn't make any sense, though. For much of the Western world, we do everything left to right, so putting that thing way over here on the right hand side of the screen, not a very good spot for it. I'll put it back at the bottom. What were some of the other options in the panel? Size. You know what, I'm going to put it back on efficient mode, and then I'm going to go to size. This is medium. We have the option of large. The icons are a little larger, actually quite a bit larger. Then we have the options for small. It makes it really small. So that's pretty cool, except I wish you could do some finer details on the sizing instead of just small, medium, large. I wish it let me set the pixel size exactly. And what were the other options? Status, keep shown, keep hidden, smart hide. So we could set it to smart hide, and when I have something open, let me just open something about the Deepin music player. I guess if I go full screen, it auto hides. Yep. See, no more panel, but when I put the mouse down here, the panel appears again. That's a pretty neat little function. I'm not sure if I would use it. Me, I just like keeping the panel shown at all times. Anyway, I think that's what you were asking, Highland, was about the dock in Deepin. Yeah, right now you have it as a taskbar. Yep. Yeah, I'm more of a traditional kind of guy. I like a standard panel, full length. I like it always shown, and I like having, a taskbar where I can click on the panel and it minimizes and unminimizes windows. And Mike, on Deepin, you can add another panel or dock. I think you can add more than one instance of a panel, but I don't think you can. I know you can't do it on a separate monitor. Like I have 3 monitors, and when I run Deepin in a multi-monitor system, it will only give me a panel on one screen. So for me, that's kind of a big deal because I really want a panel on every screen. But I think you can do a second panel, but I'm not seeing an option here, at least not right-clicking on the panel here. Similar is Budgie. Budgie's panel is kind of like this. Now, Budgie, you can have more than one panel. I know that for sure, and I think it's pretty easy to do, but it's the same way as far as you can do multiple panels, like you can do one at the bottom, one at the top, or one at the top and one at the left-hand side. But they all have to be on one screen, one monitor. If you're doing multi-monitors, you cannot have a panel on more than one monitor. Hopefully Budgie fixes that down the road. Hopefully Deepin fixes that down the road. So many of us these days use more than one monitor. Multi-monitor support should be more of a priority in a lot of these desktop environments and window managers. Oddly enough, the best window managers for multi-monitor situations are the tiling window managers. Something, that's really not user-friendly at all, like Xmonad. Xmonad is fantastic for multi-monitors. Like, it really gets that right. If you didn't have to configure it in Haskell, Xmonad would be a lot more popular than it already is. Ron Lee, it reminds me of the dock on Zorin. Yeah, I can see that a little bit. The menu system, I actually really like Deepin's menu, more so than the one in Zorin. And that's it's a very pretty menu system, but very efficient. Not a lot of extra stuff going on, not a lot of quick launchers and gadgets, just it lists your programs. If you want to categorize them, it has categories. Other than that, you don't have all that extra stuff that you don't need. You have the search function. You can type and search for something here. Some menu systems these days are getting a little overly complicated. They have a little bit too much going on. It reminds me of the dock on Zorin. Autiste, I'll have to check out the video on the toxic. Yeah. It's kind of a negative video. You may not like it. And you definitely won't like some of the comments that people are leaving on that video. Like I said, I've deleted some of the real offensive stuff. But there's a lot of trash being talked in the comments on that one. How long does Deepin music take to load 130 gigs of music? That's a good question. I would actually have to install the Deepin music player on physical hardware to check that out, or import 130 gigs of music into a virtual machine, but wow, don't want to do that. But I'm assuming you're asking that because of the Big Daddy Linux podcast the other night where we, what was it, QMMP? What's the name of the player? I think I still have it here. Let me launch it. Yeah, I loaded up 130 gigs of music in this thing, and it took like a minute. I didn't time it exactly, but maybe 1 minute. So really fast for QMMP. But I mentioned there's a terminal-based music player called CMUS, or CMUS. It loads like 130 gigs of music in seconds. I mean, like single-digit seconds. It's very, very fast. If you don't mind a terminal-based music player. Highland mentions he's going to go. See you guys. See you, Highland. I'm actually about to close the stream myself. This has been going for about an hour and 45 minutes. And really, I haven't taken a look at Pardus here in at least half an hour or so, other than when you asked about it a second ago. This stream is kind of wandering all over the place. as they often do. Usually I don't have any kind of set program here for these streams. I just go wherever it takes me. Ron, Lee, and Alan, and Richard are all saying bye to Highland. Richard, we're friendly penguins today, yeah? No toxic nature here, not in this stream. And Mike, yeah, last night's QMMP and everyone's input on how it looks and everything, yeah. QMMP, I haven't played around with it other than those couple of minutes on the podcast last night. So I'm not really sure if it's like I would use it as an everyday music player, my everyday music player. Let me kill this virtual machine again. My everyday music player that I use is Dead Beef. So I'm using Dead Beef here. See if I can resize. I had it full screen earlier because I was actually in Qtile, tiling window manager. Of course, right now I was listening to some Genesis and some Phil Collins. For those of you that know who Genesis is. Just one of the greatest bands there ever was. Yeah, CMUS is fantastic. MOC is fast, yep. The other terminal-based music player that everybody seems to use, NCMC PCP or something like that, it's nice too. It needs a better name, though. Sven's about to go to bed. See you, Sven. I'm about to shut this down within the next couple of minutes. Alan, you also use Dead Beef? Yeah. Yeah, Dead Beef, if you want something light and fast, Dead Beef is great. Ron, Clementine is awesome. I really like Clementine if you want something a little more full-featured. Mike, you haven't heard Genesis in 30 years? Yeah, because Genesis broke up about 30 years ago. That's what. But they were huge group back in the late 70s through the 80s. And then of course it broke up, and then during the 90s Phil Collins was still doing a lot of solo stuff, and Phil Collins sold many millions of records as a solo artist. Really one of my favorite artists, Phil Collins. Great voice. And as far as the band Genesis, Phil Collins was the drummer in the group. So not only was he the lead singer, he was the drummer, which was very unique at the time. And it's still unique. You don't see a lot of drummers as also like the lead vocalist. NCMP CPP, yeah. So I kind of butchered that name. Richard, Phil Collins, I Can't Dance. Yep, I Can't Dance. It was a great song. That was when they were still Genesis. Boston was fantastic. I love Boston. Yeah, Phil Collins is still around, yeah. He's like 70 years old, but I think he's still doing concerts occasionally. Yeah, several people are correcting me. NCMPCPP, yeah. What a horrible name. Anyway, guys, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this evening for the live stream. It was an interesting live stream. Pardus was actually kind of boring and not very interesting. It was basically Debian 9 with Deepin on it. Really nothing extra in it. Hardly any there was no custom Pardus software other than they had their Pardus image writer, which is a neat tool. But probably not something I'm going to take a look at in the future. Pardus, I'm probably just going to blow away that VM. I'll probably keep it a few days just in case I want to revisit anything. But probably after a week or so, I'm just going to delete that VM. Let's see. Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, Fleetwood Mac was great. Stevie Nicks. Love Stevie Nicks. Tim, Phil Collins is on tour right now. Great. Plus the late 90s, he did a lot of our songs for Disney films. Okay. That is why we use aliases. I'm assuming for the name NCMPCPP. See you all. Bye, Ron. See ya, Alan. Yep. I'm out too, guys. I'm going to go drink a beer, get to bed. I've got to early day tomorrow. Got to go to work. Back to the grind. And Randy, we had no fights. That's true. We were able to get through this stream without any infighting, no toxic, poisonous attitudes. So I want to appreciate everybody that joined the stream and conducted themselves in a civil and professional manner this evening. So take care, guys. Peace.